I'm going to be talking to Werner Antweiler, who is a professor of economics at the University of British Columbia. And this will be the third and final interview in a series about the relationship between Canada and the European Union. So, welcome to the interview, Werner.
Hello, Markham.
We're going to be talking about the June 23rd agreement that was announced between Canada and the United States. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who has a lot of experience in Europe, was part of the negotiations. And this third part is about the economic and industrial agenda. And how does economic policy and industrial policy fit into the CETA, which is the Canadian European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement?
Yeah, so in addition to creating a more a freer trading environment, we're also looking towards industrial policy and that's shaping the markets of the future. And there's a recognition that Europe and Canada, the United States too, are now lagging behind China when it comes to developing certain industries. Everything from critical minerals to batteries to even now microchips to many others. That has been recognized is a weakness and building out industrial structures that create economies of scale, pardon me, that create new innovation and innovation clusters is something that has been prioritized in trade relations. So here, the question is, how can we support each other in developing these industries and these clusters that reclaim some of that leading edge that has been bleeding away to those that have been innovating faster than Europe or Canada or the United States.
Yeah, I think it's fairly well recognized now that China, it's an innovation system, ecosystem, if you will, is far more advanced and has accelerated that advancement more than we anticipated. And the United States still leads with its innovation ecosystem. That's a big competitive advantage. Not so much Canada and not so much Europe. And so it makes sense to me that the two countries who are kind of on the outside looking in would get together to see what they could do to help each other.
Yes, and here it's important to see what Canada can put on the table. Now, Canada has, of course, a lot of resources, and we can be the ones providing critical minerals and other things to companies that are processing it and that are developing it into solutions and batteries here in Canada as well as in Europe. And so developing supply chains is really the key issue here that's on the table and integrating supply chains. That could also mean investments because to develop those industries, we need money. And Canada is a small country. The European Union is a much bigger market. And so we can help each other develop those industries by facilitating cross-border investment. And here, CETA actually provides a foundation because it's not about trade alone, it is also about investment and making sure that companies that invest in Canada from the European Union or Canadian companies investing in Europe have the certainty that the rules that will apply to them are fair and are predictable. Now, that is what will help develop those industries. Of course, there's a limited amount what governments can do. They can sort of create the foundations, but the firms have to come together in the end in developing these markets and actually makes them compete in a global market. That is a challenge. Now here we need essentially a level playing field. We need to actually have global trade rules where unfair subsidies need to be countered with countervailing duties. For example, when it came to EVs, the right approach that the European Union has done is actually putting countervailing duties in place. Here in Canada, we've followed just the United States. I think that was not the smartest way to do it. I think we need to follow international trade rules and principles that create a level playing field and not arbitrary rules. So Canada should work more closely together with the EU to figure out now where the problems are and then address them through the existing institutions.
Now, the European Union market is, I mean, in population, they're very similar to the United States, but in terms of the economy, not quite as big. To what extent is there an opportunity here for the EU to replace some of the demand that Canadian resource companies have served or that our industrial companies and service companies might serve?
Yeah, unfortunately, geography is still our destiny. We are the United States, not a neighbor. And so shipping to the United States will always be cheaper than shipping to Asia or to Europe. And so in that sense, our scope to wean ourselves off the US market is limited. And because geography is the factor here that we have to reckon with. And integration, whether it's electricity grids that are integrated across the border or supply chains like the auto industry that has now over generations been integrated across the border between Ontario and Michigan. Now, they are very difficult to unwind, and it would be much more costly to replace it with ties to Europe. So, whereas there is some growth potential with Europe that we should fully realize, we also need to realize that we need to amend our situation with the United States. We have to look beyond Trump. Trump is going to be in office for some time, but the long-term interest in the United States is to have good trade relations with Canada and Mexico. So we should look beyond the next few years that will create hardship for our economy, and we shouldn't bend over backwards to come to an accommodation. If you have to play tough, we have to play tough with the United States to come to a fair agreement. We should not throw our Canadian economy into whatever Trump demands, and so we should be very careful rebuilding our bridges but on fair and equitable terms. Because there are partners in the United States, the individual states, the individual companies that will seek to do that.
And I suppose it makes sense then, in a strategic sense, a geopolitical strategic sense, to at the very least have more trading partners. And so if over a period of time we can deepen those ties with the EU, at least it gives us some leverage with the Americans, who I guess we have to acknowledge are probably our economic destiny.
Yes, unfortunately, diversification is not a magic bullet. It just doesn't happen overnight because you cannot defy the logic of international trade and trade distance. So where we can build closer relationships, where we can build supply chains that involve European companies, it really means we have to look at where these are possible. Certainly, when it comes to resources, they can be shipped more easily. So diversifying means building infrastructure, and the more we have infrastructure that is oriented towards Europe, the better. But it means also investments that need to take place to make that happen. Because over generations, we have built that infrastructure with the United States simply because of the geographic advantage. Now, to the extent that trade is feasible, that trade has become cheaper, we need to build that infrastructure also with Europe.
Werner, thank you very much. This is the third episode or third interview that and I have done on the economic relationship and energy relationship between Canada and the EU. I'd urge you to check the other two out. They'll be on our Energy Media channel on YouTube. So, Werner, thank you very much for this.
It's been my pleasure talking to you, Mark.